Hello again guys, it's Prime here from Down4X and StupidlyEPIC.com. Today I want to talk about horror games. Go through games like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Forbidden Siren. There's some games that I've not played as well though, like Fatal Frame and things like that, which I should because they look really good. But there's an awful lot of people out there that don't really like the horror genre. Like, some people that I know are too scared of it. It's just like watching a film for them. They can't really handle scariness. They don't like monsters or anything like that. But like, okay, we'll start with like Resident Evil then. Like, Resident Evil 1 was great. Like, it was a fantastic game. It was a novel. Like, it was new. I wouldn't say novel, but it was like it was a new thing. There were scary games before that, like Splatterhouse and things like that. But that was more like scary action game. But yeah, Resident Evil 1, Biohazard in Japan is. It's a really good game. Like, genuinely scary because of its slow pace. You're just in this one location. You're in this mansion, and you're trapped in there, and there's zombies all over the mansion. And there's like zombie dogs and things like that. And you can run, but I think part of the reason why the Resident Evil series, well, at least to begin with, was really good, was because the controls, like when you press left you would turn left, when you would press right you'd turn right. It's commonly known as tank controls, but it gave it that feel that you were pretty helpless. You weren't very mobile at all, and these you were barely more mobile than these zombies that were chasing you, and the dogs and the birds and all that were far more mobile than you. So even though you were this essentially a special force guy, like a person who was like with a STARS initiative or whatever it was called, the Avengers initiative or whatever you call them, even though you were a part of this special elite force, like you didn't feel very. You didn't feel very special, you didn't feel powerful or anything like that. This is like something. It's almost like the way they handled it was like, under normal circumstances, these guys would be badass. Like Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield and all that. Like these guys would normally, like if they were fighting normal people, they'd take care of everything. Like they'd have a plan ready, and they'd have like. They'd get dropped off at the top like part of the building and that, and then they'd set up this thing where they'd just like have this killing floor essentially and just take out all these guys. But because they were caught off guard, like these dogs started chasing them, they had to bolt into this mansion, and when they got in there they're just not prepared, like just this abandoned mansion, and when they got in there they were not prepared for what was in there, like these monsters and zombies and all that, and the trap rooms and everything. It just felt really thrilling and scary. But by the time the second one came around, like the second one's really good as well, but you can see that they were heading in a more action direction. It didn't seem as scary. The location in the first game lent to its horror aspect because you weren't strictly within one location. In the second game, where you're going from the streets into the police station and things like that, then into this massive railway part and everything, it didn't feel claustrophobic. It felt kind of open. It felt you had a lot more room to breathe. And Resident Evil 3 even more so, because you start off with like a total unlimited ammo machine gun in that, and all you're doing is just mowing down these zombies as if they're nothing. It just didn't feel right. But then when Resident Evil 4 came around, that started getting back to that, the feeling of, even though they weren't proper zombies in Resident Evil 4, it got back to this sort of feeling of yeah, the location's quite vast, but it was a new control style. They'd pioneered this sort of over the shoulder aiming thing, you know, like that everybody uses nowadays. I think that was probably one of the first games to ever use it. And good on Capcom. They made a system in a game that like pretty much everybody copies now. But yeah, like Resident Evil 4, when you went into the aiming mode, just like in other Resident Evil games, when you went into the aiming mode, you couldn't move. You could only turn and look around. You know, you couldn't actually run forward or retreat. You know, you could only look around. And like that's cool because like you got all these people coming towards you and like throwing things at you. So when they're throwing things at you, you had to aim at the thing and shoot it before it hit you. You know. So it gave a more thrilling, heart pounding. It's not in the same way that the first game did though. It's more thrilling and heart pounding in a way that seems more set up for you to be in this thrill ride of action. You know. Which is fine. I mean, it doesn't do the same sort of proper horror that the first game did, but it was ample, and I preferred the fourth one anyway. Like I think the fourth game in the series is my favourite one. I completed it like 3 times. It's brilliant. But then Resident Evil 5 came around, and you know what? That was fine. It wasn't really scary. It was like you could tell that they were just going more just into an action thing. They kind of thought, well, zombies are getting old hat now. Let's just blow them to bits. You know, like let's get to the point where we're just mowing them down again, like in Resident Evil 3. It still had that problem. Well, not a problem, but it still had that thing where you couldn't move while aiming, and an awful lot of people complained about that because other games like Dead Space. It's another game we can talk about actually. Other games like Dead Space has the ability when you're aiming, you can move around, and it feels really responsive, and you feel quite quick when you're moving around, and that's great. But Resident Evil 5 didn't have that, and an awful lot of people were like, what are you doing? You know, Dead Space is the moving when you're aiming. And so in Resident Evil 6 they brought out the movement while aiming, but it didn't feel responsive, it didn't feel quick or anything like that. It felt like you could have just not put movement in and it would have been just as effective. But yeah, Resident Evil 1 through 6, like 1's great, 2's fine, 3 is like, oh man, 4's great, 5 is like, okay, just action. But Albert Wesker in the 5th game is amazing though. Like that, I think that's my favourite Albert Wesker out of all of them. And Resident Evil 6 is just a cluster F essentially. Like you could play the game, and if you liked Resident Evil, there's like 4 campaigns in the game. Insane amount of stuff for you to do. And if you didn't mind the changes that they made to the system, like instead of using tank controls, you could just run in any direction, sort of thing. 2D controls as opposed to 3D controls, I suppose is what you would call it. Yeah, if you didn't mind all those changes, then yeah, it's decent. There's an awful lot of cheap deaths in it though, like tons and tons of cheap deaths. There's like one section where you can literally, because all it was a scene where, I remember when I was playing it, I was just getting kind of sick of it. And there's this bit where you're jumping from boat to boat to get to the end, and all these along the way, all these zombies jump out at you and try and hit you. But I was just getting so sick of that level. I was just like, nah, this is getting really annoying. So I just ran all the way through that. Like it's just so linear, you can just run all the way through it. And I got to the end, and it just had this like massive line of zombies just chasing your cooperative partner. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Leon and that woman. I can't remember the woman's name. But yeah, I got to the end, and there's just this massive line of zombies chasing her while I was waiting at the door for the next section. You know, because you have to knock through the door with both of them. You know. Yeah, it's an okay game. There's nothing properly wrong with it. It's just middling compared to like Resident Evil 1 and 4, you know. Anyway, I'm digressing here. Let's move on to Silent Hill, a far scarier and far better series in my opinion. A far better series in its early inception, like 1 through 4. 1 through 4 is like amazing, and then it started to sort of go downhill when, you know, after Silent Hill Homecoming. Like, Silent Hill Homecoming was fine, I suppose. It's like nothing special. It didn't stand out as anything good, and they abused Pyramid Head in that game. Like, they just used his image as a, you know, they in the new Silent Hills, they essentially use Pyramid Head as a selling point. Like, everybody remembers this Pyramid Head guy, so we've got to put him in every one now, you know. And it's almost like he's a marketing gimmick now. But in Silent Hill 2, he is amazing. He is literally the scariest thing I'd ever seen in my life, and I could not believe someone had thought of that design. Like, so, like, it's that sort of scary where it's the fear of the unknown that scares you. It's not the fear of something ugly and hideous that's going to get you. It's the fear of, like, what's this thing's motives? You know what I mean? It's what is that? What is that? What does it look like under that thing? You know, like under that helmet that he's got. He's just got this big knife and he just walks really slowly, and you can tell he's evil because he's pretty much like raping all these like feminine doll figures, you know what I mean? Like, he's a psycho, but other than that, he's so vague and he's so abstract, you know. It's so bizarre. But anyway, Silent Hill 1, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Silent Hill 1, very scary game. Like, within the first 5 minutes you are gripped. And I remember years ago, I played Resident Evil 1 and all that, and Rage was also playing Resident Evil. Like, I had finished with Resident Evil. I picked up 3 and I couldn't finish it, and I was just like, nah, not really. I'm not interested in that. And Rage, maybe not at the same time, maybe about a while just after me playing them, he played them as well, and he was trying to get through them all before he moved on to the Silent Hill series. But I kept on telling him, look, dude, just forget about Resident Evil. It's nothing compared to Silent Hill. And he agrees with me now, but he would have, you know, he's essentially like, well, I'd rather have gotten all that out of the way and experienced a really good thing afterwards rather than just cut off halfway through and then, which I can understand, that's fair enough. But yeah, anyway, yeah, it's the first Silent Hill is leaps and bounds in terms of horror, even more so than the first Resident Evil. It's like so scary. Within the first 5 minutes, you're gripped to this game, like. And the camera angle, like they use the static cameras in the game. Well, there is a 3D camera when you're kind of running around Silent Hill, but sometimes it'll occasionally flick to a static point, and the camera, as you're like, you'll be in the distance, and your character will be running, and the camera will pan down and look over you as you're running through. You know, it's really well designed, artistically designed. Really well thought out design in terms of where they position the camera and stuff like that, and it's really unnerving. And again, it's very vague. It's that fear of the unknown. You know, Silent Hill's this place that's covered in this fog or whatever. They claim it was ash in the movie, and it's just this bizarre fog in the game. And you know what? It could possibly be ash because there's this whole, like, you know, just like in the films, there's this whole concept of, you know, fire and all that in the game. But when I was younger, I was just like, this bizarre fog that just enshrouds the entire town, and I loved it because it felt like the Twilight Zone or like Twin Peaks or something like that. And it just felt like this really bizarre town, and it's like it's not the people in the town that's the problem, because there's nobody in Silent Hill. It's like the only person in Silent Hill is the player's character. Everything else is brought forth from their psyche, you know, like everything that comes, like there's maybe 1 or 2 other people in Silent Hill just kind of wandering around, just as lost as your main character. But the town is the enemy. It's not the monsters that are placed around the town. It's the town itself that just wants to kill everything. You know, like the town of Silent Hill essentially exists to invite people along where it'll try and destroy them, whether that's physically or emotionally. You know, like a person who's already a broken man, you know, like a person who's already defeated and broken, it essentially exists to bring them into Silent Hill to kick them when they're down. You know, like, I want to see you suffer. You know, that's what Silent Hill's all about. You know, like, and it's crazy. Like, it's a really, really bizarre, scary set of games. And yeah, arguably the best one is Silent Hill 2 though, where that is the most apparent. Because in Silent Hill 1, 3 and 4 it had this sort of side story about a cult within Silent Hill, you know, a cult of like these essentially demon worshippers. But in the second game, it rarely, if ever, touched upon that concept. It was all about this one guy in the town trying to find his wife, and that was it. It's just him trying to find his, like, it's essentially what the setup is. His wife sends him a letter saying, "I'm in Silent Hill in our special place where we used to love staying," and he's, how? My wife's dead. How could I have got this letter? This is either some sort of sick joke or there's something else going on here. So he goes to Silent Hill. Bad idea, really bad idea. So he goes to Silent Hill and tries to look for her, and it's like barely, if ever, I can't even recall a point in the game where it touches upon the cult aspect of it. There might be in some of the flavor text where you pick up a note or something like that, but it's just pretty much this guy's psyche getting annihilated by the town. And it's horrifying. It's horrifying how someone who's already broken can be broken even more. It's terrifying. It's really, really scary. It's really cool though. It's really awesome. Silent Hill 3 was really I can't recommend Silent Hill 2 highly enough. You know, play it. If you've never played a Silent Hill game before, play 2. And if you're only ever going to play one, play 2. Like, if you're only ever going to play one of the games, play the second one, because that can be its own standalone thing. You know, like, you don't have to play any of the other games to get it. Silent Hill 2 is its own standalone thing. Silent Hill 3 links into 1 in a few aspects, but again, like Resident Evil 3, it kind of went more actiony. There's an awful lot of cool things that happen in it, but I'm not a fan of the whole action aspect, because, you know, the main character, she's got a, you know, it's pretty much just like Resident Evil 3. She's got a machine gun and all that, you know, and like, it just doesn't feel right, because Silent Hill's meant to be about the unknown, and instead of feeling empowered, like, it's almost like they made the main character a girl because they wanted to try and make it this, in a very loose sense, this person who can handle it, like a person who's not immediately terrified of all these things. But that's not the point of Silent Hill. The point of Silent Hill is to be absolutely terrified of everything, because this is something that's dealing with you as a person, you know. It's dealing with your deepest, darkest emotions and your sorrow and your pain, and it just doesn't work when you bring in action to that. You know, like when you bring in like machine guns and like rocket launchers and things like that, and laser beams and all that, it just doesn't bring that same gravitas of emotion and depth. It's a good game though, because like the one thing that game does excel in, compared to like even Silent Hill 2 and 4 and all that, is the way everything's designed. The world in Silent Hill 3 feels like you're inside a womb or something like that. It feels pulsating. It feels alive. And that's the best rendition of that sort of thing that I've seen. You know, like there'll be areas where the walls are essentially like flesh, and it feels like you're within like a heartbeat or something like that. It's just so well done. But an awful lot of people don't like Silent Hill 4, but I love it. I love it more than 3. They took a chance on the game, and I've got a friend who doesn't like Silent Hill 4 at all, and he would say it's because it's not a Silent Hill game. But I would say to that, so what? Like they might have conceptually initially thought of it as a different sort of series, but then they tied it into Silent Hill, and I think they've done a really good job of tying it into Silent Hill. It's such a simple little thing that ties it together as well. They essentially made an entire story out of a throwaway line in Silent Hill 2, and it was a really cool little story. Essentially, in Silent Hill 2, you rake through this garbage. You're raking through, you know, and you find this piece of, like, this old newspaper. And it talks about this guy called Walter Sullivan who like killed like 11 people or something like that, and then killed himself in prison by stabbing a spoon through his neck or something like that. And Silent Hill 4 takes that just that little bit of newspaper article to the next stage, and tells the story of Walter Sullivan trying to essentially do this dark sacrament thing, this evil sort of thing that he's trying to do to resurrect his dead mum. And those 11 kills, like including himself, were all part of that thing. And that's a bit of a spoiler. I'm sorry. I should have mentioned that. I'll probably write it in the description. But yeah, like it's such a small throwaway thing in Silent Hill 2, but they made an entire story out of that for Silent Hill 4. So like 2 and 4 tie together, even if it's just vaguely, and 1 and 3 tie together. But 1, 3 and 4 also all have that whole cult aspect in it, but only 2 is the only one that can stand alone if you only want to play one of them, you know. It's fantastic though. I love the Silent Hill series, up to 4 at least. I played Homecoming about 3 or 4 times as well because I'm a fanboy and I liked playing it. You know, I just liked it because it was Silent Hill. It wasn't. It's by no means indicative of how good a Silent Hill game can be, because the best one is 2 and then 4. You know, for me at least. I've not played any more Silent Hill games after that. I got Origins on the PSP and I never got through it. Rage, I lent it to Rage though, and he played it and he loved it. He thought it was great. It's not, like, obviously not in the same level as Silent Hill 2 or 4, but yeah, he totally he got into it. He loved it. He thought it was good. Let me see what time we're at. Whoa, 23 minutes. Whew. I'll just continue. This will take forever to upload, but I'll just keep talking. Anyway, so where are we now? Forbidden Siren. There's not much I can say about Forbidden Siren. Silent Hill's a terrifying game. Silent Hill's a terrifying series. But I can't even play Forbidden Siren because it's that scary. It's so... And it's not scary in the same way that Silent Hill's scary. It's scary in a sort of in-between way between Silent Hill and Resident Evil. Because Forbidden Siren's not like an unknown horror thing. Like, the concept of it is abstract and unknown, but the enemies that are there are extremely dangerous. And it has this gameplay element in it called sight jacking, and it allows you using, I think it's you hold one of the shoulder buttons and you use one of the analog sticks. You can essentially tune your vision into the surrounding enemies. Because the game's so dark visually, you can barely see in front of you. Sometimes it's bright and daylight, but it's quite foggy as well. This series of games is made by the same guy that made the first Silent Hill game, by the way. So he's essentially taken a concept and like ran with it. He's like unknown horror, total scary, and that's really cool. I can't bring myself to play it though. Like, I've heard Forbidden Siren 2 is easier, but I'm the kind of guy who wants to play through the first, then the second, then I'd like to play a game in order of its release. The only time I've never done that is with the Yakuza games. I bought both the games at the same time, and yeah, I bought both the first games at the same 1 and 2. And I got 2 first through the door, like I got them delivered, and I got them through I got the second one through the door first. And when I did, I played it, and then the first game came through the door, and I was like, oh man, I should have waited. But anyway, that's yeah. I'm the kind of guy who would like to play something in order. So, but I can't bear to get through Forbidden Siren, the first one. I just can't play it. It's just too terrifying. There's just something about it. The noises that the enemies make in the game are horrifying, and when you're in their vision and you see the things that they're doing, like they'll just be standing there and you're looking through their vision and all they're doing is just hammering walls and things like that. It's almost like they're trying to be real people, but they're not. It's so strange, and I can't remember what one it is, whether it's the first or the second one on the PS2. One of them didn't get released in America. I think it was maybe the second one, maybe? I think the first one came out and then America was just like, screw that, we're not touching the second one. But it came out in Europe. We've got both games sitting there, and yeah, I can't play Forbidden Siren. It's maybe someday I'll dust my PS2 off and then fire it in my PS2 and try and play it, but it's almost like each stage is its own. There's not one single character that's the protagonist, by the way. It's like it's all these different people on this like island area, and they're all trying to get away from this horrible thing that's like this this otherworldly presence, like not just the monsters, but this whole concept of being stranded on this island, and there's a few of them, and yeah, so each level is almost like its own puzzle. You've got to get from one area to the other to progress the story, but there's areas where it's nearly impossible. You've got this guy who's got maybe like a pistol with like 6 rounds in it, but the problem with the game is that some people will have infinite ammo, some people will just have the 6 bullets, and it's really difficult, because if somebody catches you, if you get shot like twice, you're dead. If you get surrounded by enemies, like if they hear you, they'll chase you. And one of the cool things about the game is that you can hide. You're able to hide in like toilet stalls and all that, but the enemies will like kick through the toilet stall doors and like look around looking for you, and then it's really, really scary, and it's heart pounding, and in a thrilling way rather than a more classic horror way where it's the fear of the unknown. It's more heart pounding in the sense that you don't want to get caught, But yeah, Forbidden Siren 1 and 2, they're really good. Yeah. I don't know what else like. They got Dead Space as well. I think the best that like Dead Space is good for jump scares, but it's not a truly horrifying game like Forbidden Siren or Silent Hill is. It's scary in the sense of like heart pounding thrill, like it's more of a thriller game. It's essentially zombies in space, and yeah, this game, I think the best part of it is the character arc of Isaac Clarke. Through the 3 games, his character progression is really, really well written. the basic setup to the first game is he gets a distress signal from this ship that's out in deep space, and he's this engineer guy, and there's this distress signal, and they need backup, and all their systems are down and stuff like that. So this crew go out to this ship, which is essentially called a planet cracker. It's a mining vessel where they go to other planets that have untapped resources, and they crack the planet open and essentially take all the minerals and all that. But the setup is essentially they get this SOS distress call, and they go there. But Isaac has an ulterior motive. He also gets this distress call from his wife. She's on that ship as well, so or his girlfriend or his wife. I can't remember whether they're married or not. It doesn't matter, I suppose, in terms of plot anyway. But yeah, like he specifically joins the crew and goes out there to try and save his wife, essentially. And when he gets there, yeah, finds the ship's pretty much abandoned except for this what they're called as necromorphs. It's essentially all these, like, it's essentially the crew reanimated and like becoming these like weird twisted creatures with blade arms and things like that, and they're all essentially zombies in space, but very fast, very dangerous, which is really good why you're able to move around while aiming in Dead Space, because it can get really hectic at times, and there's even zombies who almost seem like they can phase in and out of that's not what's happening. They're just so fast, you know. They can get around really quickly in the levels and all that. But it almost looks like they could be phasing in and out and immediately like approaching you. That's how fast they are. But you've got the ability to use stasis on them, which slows them down to like a slow running speed. It's almost like they're kind of, you've slowed down time around only them, you know. So you can bring out your gun and shoot them. The one thing that they do differently in Dead Space though is, you've probably heard this already, but Dead Space is a game where the zombies aren't killed by shooting them in the head. They're killed by dismembering their limbs. These space zombies, their weakness is not their smashing their brains. Like, removing the head or destroying the brains is nothing. No, it's nothing to do with that. These things will keep on going even if you cut their heads off. You've got to remove the arms and legs. You've got to dismember their arms and legs in order to defeat them, because I suppose that kind of makes sense as well, because if you remove a zombie's arms and legs, they're not going to be able to get over to you, you know. Like, so I assume the logic behind it is, no, their brain's not their weakness, it's not being able to move towards you that's the weakness. But yeah, the three games, Dead Space 1, 2 and 3, they're all fairly similar in terms of content. The locations vary wildly. Like in the first game, you're just on this one ship, but in the second game, there's this massive sort of, it feels far more expansive, even though it's a corridor shooter. In the third game, you're pretty much on this planet, and it's a really, it feels really big, and it feels really good to play. And it's got co-op as well, which might not initially seem very good for a horror game. But remember, we're talking about an action horror game, you know, survival action here, not survival horror. Survival thriller, you know. But yeah, the best part of the game is the story arc of Isaac Clarke, because to begin with, in the first game, he has no idea what he's going to be going up against. He has absolutely no concept of these necromorphs. Like, he's at the very beginning, if you're quick enough, when the ship starts getting, you know, distressed, and they've got to make an emergency landing at the very beginning on this new ship. While everything's going on and everybody's kind of like looking around, you can move the camera. Like, you don't get to see Isaac Clarke's face except at the very end of the game. If you miss this at the very beginning of the game, the only time you get to see his face is at the end of the game. So while everything's going crazy and you see him kind of looking around, you can move the analog stick around him and see his face, how like terrified he is of this. So in the first game you don't get to see his face until the end, or at the very beginning, if you can sort of jump on it when the opportunity arises. But in the second game though, you see his face all the time, because it's not a mystery anymore. You know, you've seen him in the first game, you've seen him at the end of the first game. And I suppose the problem with the series as well though is that it kind of assumes that you've been playing the first game as well. Like, I suppose you don't need to in order to grasp what's going on, but yeah. In the first game he's like, he has no concept of this, but by the end of it he's totally broken. Like he's wrecked. He's a wreck. He's absolutely annihilated. So like, because of the horrors he's seen, because of how nuts this has made him. So slight spoiler warnings. I'll just give you the setup to the second game and the setup to the third game, in lieu of, you know, like, I'm just trying to explain to you the character arc of Isaac from between games, you know, like what's happened to make him change over the series. So slight spoiler warnings for like the beginning of each game. So I suppose I'll maybe hint on the endings of the games as well, but like that's probably not going to be as spoilery as the beginning. So like at the start of the second game, he's wrecked so much by the end of the first game. At the start of the second game, he's essentially a mental patient. He's in essentially a space insane asylum, because I suppose none of these people believe how crazy this all is, but yeah. He's an insane asylum patient, so you can tell this has affected his mental capacity severely. He is absolutely wrecked by this, and I thought that was cool. And in the first game he doesn't speak. All you can hear from him is the grunts and all that of when he gets hit, you know, and then maybe when he's stamping down or something, he'll like or whatever, you know. Then in the second game he has a voice and he actually speaks, and the cool thing that they've done in the game is, throughout the first game he's an engineer. Like he's essentially this nerdy engineer guy, and throughout the first game they try and get you to believe that he's this engineer by getting you to do all these engineering things, like you've got to fix this by doing this. But throughout the game all it essentially amounts to is you using the total, like the gravity defying thing to put a battery in place or something like that. You know, it's nothing too spectacular. But in the second game he's literally building his own weapons. You know, you've got to collect all the parts, and then when you get to a bench you're building all his own weapons and all that. You know, he feels more legitimately an engineer in the second game. From the second and third game, his character seems far more fleshed out in terms of who he is and what he does, you know. So at the end of at the start of the second game, he's an insane asylum patient. He's even in a straitjacket and all that. So for the first 5-10 minutes of the game, you can't do a thing because you're strapped into this insane jacket. All you can do is run. So all this crap's happening. You've got to bolt through. But by the end of the game, he's so broken. Like even more so than the first game. Like he cannot fathom. And in the second game, it's because he's faced the horrors from the first game before, because he knows what to expect. He's terrified. Like he's dealt with this stuff before, so throughout the game he's terrified. So when he even the little point of when he's stamping on enemies, like you can keep on tapping the stamp button, you can stamp on them when they're down. It sounds like he's kind of grimacing and whinging, you know. He's like, like in the first game he didn't do that because he was just like, what the crap is this? Get lost. But in the second game he knows what he's facing, so he just doesn't want to handle this. He doesn't want to cope with it. He doesn't want to have to do this. But by the third game he is absolutely broken. His life is wrecked by this. everybody that he cares about is gone. He's just this broken down shell of a man who's wasting away in an apartment looking at all these photos of like necromorphs and all these people involved with this unitology cult and all that. You know, he's just like he's like this havering madman. Like he's just this broken down freak of nature. You know, like just he's so obsessed by the concept in that now. Like he can't get it out of his head. So I just love the way the character progressed through all the games. You know, like it just and just the peace. There's an amazing sense of peace and finality to the end of the third game. I don't want to give anything away, but it almost feels like you like Isaac can breathe a sigh of relief. It's done, you know. Finally, it's over. In both a literal sense and a metaphorical sense, you know, like it's over. Yeah, it's finally over. You know, like he can breathe a massive sigh of relief. So from going from this sort of timid, kind of like unaware guy to like a guy who's dealt with it before and he's terrified of it, to like a broken shell of a man, it's this story arc that's like it's almost like a metaphor for life. You know, like you start off as this bright-eyed child unaware of the world, and then halfway through your life you're just like, this is crap, and then at the end you're just like, just let it be over, you know, just I want it to be over, just let it be over, and then finally when it is over you're just like, it's just perfect, you know, just the way his character arcs through all the series is astonishing. They've done an excellent job of that, and I know EA gets an awful lot of flack, but they make really, like, they're a publisher, but like they're the companies that work for them, you know, like the companies that get their games published by them do really, really good jobs with their games. You know, they're absolutely fantastic set of games for like Mirror's Edge, you know, Dead Space. You know, like I can't think of like many things off the top of my head, but you know, like they're not just this company who makes like year in year out, you know, Call of Duty thing. Like I suppose Battlefield's like that, but you know, like the companies who do put their heart and soul into like making these great games, they do a really, really good job of them. So like, yeah, four series of games there. Like Resident Evil, the 1 and 4 is really good. So like, just to recap, 1 and 4 is really good. The other ones are like 2's fine, but the rest are kind of like meh. Five like 1 and 4 are great. 2 and 5 are like, and 3 and 6 are just like, ugh. So like, you know, it's like 1 4, 2 like 2 5, 3 6. They're their own separate things, and they just get progressively worse with each thing, you know. Silent Hill 1, 2, 3, and 4 are fantastic, and I can't recommend them highly enough. Like Silent Hill 2 especially, because that's a standalone game. If you've only got time to play one of them, Silent Hill 2 is the one to play. If you can play 2 of them, Silent Hill 2 and 4, because 4 links in slightly with 2, but 1 and 3 are just as awesome. They're really good, but they have like 1, 3, and 4 have their own sort of like tied in thing with, you know, the cult and all that. But 2 on its own. Play 2 if you can only play one of them. Forbidden Siren. If you want scary games, like really scary games that make you terrified to just, like, every time I think about putting Forbidden Siren 1 on, I just shudder and think, no, if I put it on, I'm not going to play it. I'm just going to stand there and just be terrified. Like, it's the sort of next, I don't know what to say, the next progress of true horror, because like because true horror is meant to be about the fear of the unknown, the fear of like the bizarre, you know, the fear of like someone wearing an emotionless mask and then just being like, you know, I mean, just like you don't know what the intent is, and that's truly horrifying. Forbidden Siren's not exactly like that, but it's more scary because of that. You know, it's not as truly horrifying, but because it's kind of closer to like Dead Space in that sense. Like Dead Space, like these things, if they see you, they'll kill you. but in Dead Space it's more like it's all set up, it's all scripted, you know. Whereas Forbidden Siren, and all the only thing that's scripted is these things on their patrol points, or the locations where they're just hammering into walls or something like that. And if they hear you, there's a sound thing in the game where if they hear you, they will be like, huh, and they'll chase you. You know, they'll come after you. So it's not scripted like Dead Space is, but Dead Space has got a really good storyline in terms of the main character. And if nothing else, play Dead Space. Don't play Dead Space for the scares. Play Dead Space for Isaac Clarke, because his character is, it truly, like, it's the best example of a truly living, breathing, evolving character. You know, like in terms of his personality and all that, he changes. You know, as a person who experiences things, changes. You know, it feels natural and organic. So yeah, like, I should not have maybe spent so long, because this is going to take forever to export, but I just wanted to talk about, like, horror games this time. And in fact, like, literally 2 minutes before I decided to record, I was thinking, what should I talk about? I just felt like recording something, and then I was looking at my PS2 games and like, Forbidden Siren, should I talk about that? And then I was looking at all the horror games that I had, so I just, horror games this time. So thanks again, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any idea, like comments or whatever like that or suggestions for horror games for anybody else who's interested in horror games, like me as well, you know, like if I'm able to get a hold of it, I'll probably want to check it out. But yeah, if you've got any comments or suggestions or whatever, just put them down there, and I'll definitely read them. So thanks again, folks, and what's next? RPGs maybe? I don't know, action games, I don't know, whatever. We'll maybe do it a game by game basis rather than a series by series, because this can get really long if I'm talking for ages. Yeah, okay, so thanks guys, and I'll see you next time.